What if everything you thought you knew about inclusion was wrong? What if the biggest barriers weren't policies but people? And what if one of those people was you? They say inclusion is a box you tick. I say it's a mirror you hold up. And sometimes the reflection isn't easy to look at. In season 1 of the Organisational Inclusionist, we sat in those uncomfortable spaces together. We heard stories that changed how we see leadership, equity, and each other. Season 2 is not about repeating the same conversations. It's about going deeper. It's about asking the questions polite company avoids. Pulling back the curtain, not just on the boardroom, but on the biases we carry home with us, the policies we never question, and the silences that keep us safe, but not free. This season, you'll hear voices that challenge you, moments that move you, and strategies you can actually use. And I won't pretend to have all the answers, because I'm still learning too. But I promise you this, every conversation will be honest, human, and rooted in the belief that inclusion is not a side project, it's the work. My name is Grace Masuro, and I am your host. Welcome to season 2 of the Organisational Inclusionist. Sometimes allyship begins with a grand declaration, but most of the time it begins quietly, in a room where you realise that the people with the least power are doing the most work to be heard. Andrew Elliott is a man who could have stayed comfortable, a successful leader, respected in his field, with no shortage of opportunities to advance in his own career. But instead of standing at the sidelines of gender equity, he stepped into the arena, not as a saviour, but as a man willing to listen, really listen, and to use his voice where it matters. In his 20 years of leading teams from the fast-paced world of live events to the mission-driven renewables sector, Andrew has learned that the most powerful leadership doesn't come from telling people what to do. It comes from making sure everyone feels safe, seen, and valued enough to give their best. Today, we talk about what it really takes for men to become active allies to women, why joining a women's network changed the way that he works and the way that he sees the world, and how we can all, regardless of our gender, invite more people into this work, especially those who think it doesn't concern them. This isn't a conversation about perfection. It's about courage, humility, and the power of showing up again and again, even when it's uncomfortable. Andrew Elliott, welcome to the Organisational Inclusionist. Thank you so much for joining me today. Did you like your intro?
I loved that intro. Thank you. It's really nice to hear that back. It's really nice.
Yay, I love that view. And I love what you're doing. So this is a really great opportunity just to talk about it a little bit more and share some of the amazing things that you have done and are doing with our listeners. So Andrew, before we get stuck in, I'd love it if you could please introduce yourself and your why to our listeners.
Okay, Grace. So I am the very proud father of 2 children, Iona, 8 years old, and Monroe, who's 5. Quite Scottish names, I know. That is my Scottish heritage, born and bred in Aberdeen. My wife, Nikki Denson Elliott, we're a great family of 4. That's my pride and joy, my family. And I guess they're my day job, they're my night job, they're my everything in the background. And I'm a very, very proud leader within EDF Power Solutions. I was part of a startup that was acquired by EDF Renewables, and we've recently changed our name to EDF Power Solutions. I'm a performance lead there. And what does that mean? We are responsible, the team I help lead is responsible for the delivery of all of the biggest onshore solar, huge battery projects and private cable routes that will power data centers.
Amazing. Thank you. So Andrew, you've worked across such different worlds, from live events and now renewables, but a constant thread is your human first leadership. Can you share where that approach comes from?
Yes, I was really lucky. I have had a varied career, and live events, theatre, corporate events, that's kind of everything must go live by the end of the day. Very tight deadlines, usually up against it sometimes in live events. Maybe not all the equipment is working or there, or the client turns up late, or the venue changes something last minute. And so just reflecting on that can take extraordinary feats by people coming together in a special way to kind of really get the show on. The show must go on type thing. And when you kind of witness, so I wasn't always the leader in those situations, but I witnessed some quite amazing things where teams came together because of the way we acted together in those situations. Feeling that sense of unity, it doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from great people understanding each other and taking the time to get to know each other a bit better. And I guess that's where it was kind of grounded 15 odd years ago when I started to be exposed to more of those situations. Really getting to see what great teams coming together can do, really sometimes achieving what feels like the impossible on the day. And then as I moved into more of the corporate space, that theme continued, where I've been in kind of high growth companies, some successful, some not successful. Again, sometimes being up against the odds when you're not sure whether you'll have enough money to pay the salaries, or you're not sure if this big idea will come off when you're in that kind of startup environment, and really again, having kind of unique talent, but it needs to come together somehow, and it comes together by people taking the time to kind of get to know each other and understand what makes them tick, why they show up, what's going on at home. Sometimes that helps. It gives you that rounded picture of why people can and can't perform at their best when you're with them in that moment. So it's just, for me, it was being a lot more conscious of the people around me and enjoying getting to know them a little bit more than just turning up to do a job and going home at night. And of course, that comes with goods and bads. You experience the real highs together, where you get to celebrate and party together when you have done a great show or you have pulled off an amazing feat with a company being acquired. But it also, comes with the challenges of, oh, hang on, that didn't go very well, and why didn't it go well, and what could we do better next time? So having that kind of, you said it in the intro, but that humility and being able to be self-aware enough to kind of take some lessons from the goods and the bads on every single day.
Yeah, sure. I love that. So when did you first become aware that your gender, your race and your role gave you power and privilege in the workplace? I feel like there's always like a pivotal moment for us when we realize something like that is so life-changing and game-changing. So when do you think you first became aware of that?
So I've been thinking about this a little bit, and being 100% honest, I would love to say it was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But it was, I'd love to say it was 10 years ago, but it wasn't. It was in my most recent role with the company that I'm in at the moment. And the reason that happened was because I was lucky enough to work with people that brought out the best in me. So they gave me opportunity. They believed in me. We built a relationship, so we had each other's back. I'd never really had that before. So if we're thinking about good leadership, that's what their leadership meant to me. That's what it did to me. It enabled me to become the best version of myself.
Amazing.
By doing that, I think they enabled me to kind of open my eyes to the world around me in a different, not necessarily a different way, but just enabled me the opportunity to think outside of what had previously been fairly, kind of static box, my mindset, which was thinking about all these other things I've talked about, but not really seeing people for really who they were and why we were performing the way we were. And so I think, that was probably within about the last 5 or 6 years, this more recent role.
I love how honest you've been about that, because I do think there are a lot of people potentially sitting in shame at the fact that their realization might have come yesterday. And it's like, actually, we all are going on this journey of self-awareness and just like kind of coming into the reality of where we are as a society and as corporations in our own time, right? And I think it's really important that you've just shared that. So for anyone that's listening, thinking, well, I've only just arrived, it's absolutely okay, as long as you are arriving, right?
Yeah, and I think it's okay on that journey to lean into the feeling of discomfort. We'll probably talk about it a bit, over the rest of this conversation, but I would say weekly, I'm not quite daily anymore, but I definitely weekly feel those moments of discomfort and have to, acknowledge and understand why I feel the way I do. But I am much more comfortable feeling like that now because I have good people around me who I've built relationships with that I can ask them a question that sometimes feels so stupid to me, but they are my kind of go-to confidant who I can say, is this just me, or this thing I'm thinking, do you mind if I ask you what it is? And those, they may seem like big things when I first realized they're not big things anymore. So there is a bit of just accepting that wherever we are on that journey, we should always be feeling that because of our place of privilege, right? And that's okay for us to feel like that. In fact, it's better than okay. It's good that we're feeling like that because we're self-conscious enough to want to understand what's going on in the background.
No, I love that. I love that. I always try and get the message across that I think as a leader who really wants to, kind of be the change you want to see and really want to drive that from the top, I invite leaders at that level to lean into a commitment that says, I refuse to be comfortable until every single person in my organization is comfortable and experiences the discomfort that I might feel periodically less and less, right? And the honest thing is that, many people from minoritized backgrounds are probably uncomfortable a lot of the time. And the best leaders are those that say what you're saying, which is, I'm really comfortable leaning into that discomfort now. And I've got great people around me that help me navigate that and become, the best version of myself, etc. Really, really powerful stuff.
You've got to make time for it. That's the thing. I think you've got to be prepared to, in corporate speak, you've got to be prepared in your eyes to be less productive This is less about focusing on output delivery. You could, if you want to justify it to yourself, you can say that in an intangible way, this will lead to better delivery in the long term because everyone will be working together more harmoniously. But this is about creating some space in your day to listen to people around you.
Definitely. So many men want to be allies, but they're not sure how. For you, what does allyship actually look like day to day?
So it's about being conscious and cognizant of my thoughts, like every day, my thoughts, my behaviors, and what I say. And that could come in a micro moment where I'm sitting in a room or a virtual room with majority men and minority women, thinking about enabling that person in the minority to make sure they've got space. So everyone is heard. Yeah, that's an obvious one that we're told as leaders all the time. Make sure that everyone around the room is heard, but it doesn't happen. As much as we're taught it, we're taken through courses that teach you it, people don't practice it. And so that's one tiny example of where we should be far more aware of the people in those situations and making sure that they have an opportunity to speak. Now, for me, that also might mean a step back from that, which is knowing that person is going to be in a meeting with me and speaking to them in the background beforehand, saying, it's really valuable. I really rate your input in these moments. Shall I tee you up, or do you just feel comfortable enough to speak up when you have a really valid point? Because not everyone does.
I love that.
So there's definitely moments where you need to create those spaces for people, whoever they are in the room, if they haven't had a chance to speak.
Definitely. And this kind of tees me up nicely for the next question. So you've said listening is one of your superpowers. What have you heard from women that shifted how you show up at work or in society?
So I think what was really interesting is I, as you said in your introduction, I am on the Women's Network Committee at my work. And as part of that, over a year ago, I started speaking to colleagues confidentially just to see what it was like being a woman in our organisation. Not to get dirt on people, but just to listen and sort of play it back to some of the more senior leaders, so the directors in the business, yeah? And nothing I heard was kind of that startling, and some of it was, disappointingly obvious. You just hope that it isn't taking place in the organisation. So what does that mean? That means that there's still too many women, not just in my organisation, but other friends I've spoken to are expected to get the drinks in a meeting, or order the cards for someone's leaving do, or organise the cake if someone's leaving, or make sure that everyone's got the invitation. And some people might say, well, are they in an organisational role, like an administrative role? Lots weren't, and so that it was just our default in some of those situations were expecting or asking the female in the room or in the group to organise those things. That's really obvious, but that's not okay. And I'm very comfortable with going into different teams of my work or other teams in other places of work and kind of spelling that out quite point blank. We've had a couple of those instances where I work now, and they go down really well. There's these kind of mirror holding up moments to teams to say, it's not okay for women to be the ones who are expected to do these tasks. And make it again, sort of reiterating that point of everyone needs a place to be able to contribute to a meeting. Don't speak over someone or not enable them to speak just because they're a young female in their 20s. Usually, depending on the point of the meeting, they might have the best input because they've just been sitting listening to everything everyone else has been saying. And in fact, as a leader, you should be doing that. You should be letting everyone else speak first and then speaking at the end to kind of summarize what people are saying. So I do think there's some value really in kind of taking a step back and looking at how people lead in those scenarios and making sure that we're just not going to the default that we've all been used to in the past.
So what strikes me in hearing your journey is that allyship for you is woven into how you lead, right? And I think this is where so many organizations miss the mark. They focus on the what, the policies, the events, the hashtags, but they forget the actual how of it all. So how do people actually behave in meetings? Who gets interrupted? Who gets credit for ideas? Who gets the benefit of the doubt, etc.? I think that's where allyship moves from the abstract into the everyday. It's in those small choices that leaders make when no one's watching, and it's in the courage to challenge a comment that isn't okay, even if it risks the comfort of the room. Sometimes we need to just all be uncomfortable, right? So I want to zoom out for a minute, because your personal commitment matters, but it also has a ripple effect. How have you seen your actions influence the wider culture around you?
So I had a really interesting scenario with a friend last year. So he is a Muslim colleague who we've kind of formed a friendship, a relationship where we can talk to each other. He's very comfortable with my silly questions, my inquisitive nature about his religion and what it means for him. And we had this really lovely instance last year where I'd been asking him for over a year what Ramadan meant to him and how it affected him. So 3 years ago, go back 3 years, I was aware of the impact of Ramadan on him during that month. What I mean by that is he was working with me and we had an event, and I had managed to understand what his requirements were well enough to make sure that the place we were in had a separate room where he could go and pray during that period. I didn't feel particularly special, but it meant a lot to him. We also made sure that the food that was available, which everyone loved, fitted his requirements as well. So that was kind of 3 years ago. 2 years ago, our relationship has grown a little bit more, and I was so curious as to. So I have fasted because of health reasons. I had fasted, but I had never fasted to the extent that you do within Ramadan. And I said to him, "Well, I'm gonna just do this." And I started saying this prior to Ramadan, and then I'd chosen a day which actually turned out to be the longest day, so the longest hours of daylight, which I did regret. But we then went on that journey together, so that was lovely, right? He told me in advance. I asked him advice, what I should do. It's essentially nil by mouth from sun up to sundown. What I should eat, how I might feel, even though his body was far more used to it. And we went through that day together. Not physically together, we were working virtually, but we enjoyed sort of that connection through that moment. And I'm also part of Everyone's Welcome group within work. So I relayed my experience to others in that group after the day. And so we're still talking last year. And another Muslim on the call said, "Oh, that sounds amazing. We should do that in a bigger format." So this year, there was two people in one of our offices, two Muslim people in one of our offices, organised as many people that wanted to join them as possible. And there was about 12 people. So we went from 1-to-1 to 2-to-12. And the 12 people all experienced that day together. So none of them had any food or water from sun up to sundown. But at the end of the day, the two Muslim people had prearranged for food to be brought into work, and everyone then enjoyed it together. And they talked about how it tasted, how it smelled, and how it made them feel as well. So I guess, that is quite a little success story, but that's a lovely example of how something tiny, which is just a relationship at work, where you're getting to know someone, you're getting to be slightly more inquisitive, can then grow into something bigger. I'm not saying we're going to do a whole organisation that's going to fast at the same time, but if there's these small pockets, that's where understanding turns into action.
Absolutely. And there is something so powerful about being able to put yourself into someone else's shoes for a day, just the empathy and the awareness that creates. But also the fact that even though that happened in the workplace, those 12 people would have gone home and talked about that to their friends and to their families. So they would have educated other people as well. And I think that's really, really powerful. So what could it look like if more leaders, more men in particular, made that same choice to show up in that way?
Well, I think what leads us into those interesting scenarios together is by being curious, by being honest, kind of by being open. And, the word that a lot of men are uncomfortable with, but we're being drawn towards more so, is vulnerability. Now, obviously, all those things go together, but what actually comes out of those, and I'm not going to lie, I learned this from, a CEO, that vulnerability that was transformative. Never had I seen a CEO cry.
Yeah.
And he cried in front of us, and that opened up the ability to really be your kind of really truest, right, rawest self. But by doing that, you then have I had an amazing conversation with the people I wouldn't have expected to one morning about what Pride Month meant to them. And going from, a fairly interesting, but with very low expectations, going into that call, I found out that one of the people in the call, their mum had come out 20 years ago, and that actually what Pride Month meant to them as a family was totally different than what we would have expected. But the fact is, he was able to open up and talk very openly about that. Someone else talked about their sister being gay and what it meant to their family. So all of a sudden, from having a moment of, I feel like we should discuss this. It's Pride Month. I don't really feel like I've discussed it enough with people, and who knows where this could lead to then having 2 out of 5 people on the call really sharing some very vulnerable experiences and moments with us. It just kind of, and I got some great feedback after it from people on that call that had said, I would never have discussed that. But all of a sudden, we've discussed it together as a small team, and they all take something away from that, which has got a positive impact on them and hopefully on others. So there's maybe a bit of a ripple effect on others after that as well.
Absolutely. So one thing I'm conscious of, and I think many of us know, is that change makers of our generation, I'm assuming we're of similar ages, so change makers of our generations, we're probably not going to receive the benefits of the work that we're doing. It's going to take a number of years for this to really start to change the world, right? But I think it's so important because we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? And essentially my goal is to be a giant for the future generations coming. So really hoping to move the needle so it's not so hard for them when they come up. So I know that your ambition is to impact and influence men generally to become better allies, whether that be in the workplace, whether that be in their communities, etc. So what kind of world do you hope your allyship will help build for the next generation? Because essentially we're not doing this work for us. It's not necessarily going to transpire that all of the change we need to see is going to be visible during our lifetime.
No, and it's disappointing, right, that you say that, because I totally agree. This is about what those who come after us can experience and enjoy. I mean, I would love. What does the most inclusive workplace that you can imagine look like? And that's an amazing moment to just think about, what does the most inclusive workplace that I can imagine look like? How do people feel when they turn up to the office or virtually? How do they act? How do they behave? How do they support each other? How do we perform? That's next level blue sky thinking, but that's what I would like to see created. Fortunately and unfortunately, most of us experienced COVID, and that catapulted us into a world of hybrid working that many were uncomfortable with, so that it showed us what the art of the possible was. Now, I think we haven't quite found the perfect hybrid model yet, but there is a world where a hybrid working model, parents, people who are looking after people with disabilities, people who have disabilities, that can all enter a workplace and really feel like they're able to turn up and deliver their best. Not every day. No one delivers their best every day. But there's the feeling of being in a room with others that have got your back and that are really kind of looking out for each other. That enables, like a really high performing, really inclusive, really enjoyable and happy and fun working environment. So that's kind of where I hope it gets to. How will it get there? There's going to be lots of, as you've said, there's lots of kind of micro and even macro events that need to take place on that journey. And we just need to create small kind of nuclei of these instances where people feel comfortable to challenge and support each other on the journey. And so I think by doing that many times with many different people, we will eventually have an impact. But it's going to take a while for many of those ripple effects to take effect.
Absolutely. So this podcast episode will go out to everyone, male and female, but I know that you're really trying to create change amongst the male population, which isn't everyone, obviously, because you're only one person. But for any men listening, what's one thing they could start doing tomorrow to create a more equitable community, whether that be in their workplace, whether that be in their golf club, whether that be in their pub? What's one thing they could start doing tomorrow?
So I think it would be amazing if we could stop seeing colour and gender and just be interested in people for who they are. Now, what does that mean? It means you need to take time to form a connection with people and really enjoy that conversation and lean into the discomfort sometimes of what it means, but just get to know other people and what their journey is and why they've come on that journey and where they've come from. I would never, ever 6 years ago, 10 years ago, imagined I would have fasted with a colleague because of my upbringing. It wasn't that I didn't experience diversity. I would never have felt like I could have a relationship with someone enough to want to go on that journey with them. That's one simple example, but by being curious, by taking that time, and it does take time, but take time to listen. So make time to listen. Away from performance-driven KPIs, spreadsheets. This is sit down and ask people what it really feels like to work in that organization. And then be prepared to act and make some change.
Amazing. I think, that is the utopia, right? A world where colour and gender, etc., don't matter. I think at the moment, because we are not there yet, one of the things that I regularly invite people to do is to really look at, if they were to count, their five or six associates, colleagues, people they chat to at the club or they play paddle with, which seems to be everyone's new thing. Yeah. What do they look like? Are there women in those, in that 5 or 6? And if not, add a couple, because it's when we spend that time together and have those conversations that we get to really get to grips with what it's like to be, a woman, or to be from the other LGBTQIA plus community, or to be Jamaican, Indian, etc. So I think it's really important actually to be quite intentional in the conversations that you're having and the relationships that you're building, like the one that you built with your Muslim colleague that enabled you to then experience, what Ramadan is like for him, etc. I think those types of actions are so powerful. So Andrew, listening to you today, I'm reminded that allyship isn't something we ever finish. It's not a badge you earn once and you wear forever. It's a practice. It's a series of choices we make, often quietly and sometimes in ways that no one else will see. What I love about your journey is that it's not about perfection, it's about persistence. And it's hard, but it does require that persistence. It's about showing up again and again, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. If you've got privilege, and we all have privilege in some area of our lives, then you also have power, the power to open doors, the power to amplify someone else's voice, and the power to change the conversation in a meeting, in a hallway, or in a community centre, or David Lloyd. The question is, what will you do with that power? Allyship is not a label you give yourself. It's a word that's earned through the testimony of those you stand beside. And from the stories you've told today, Andrew, I'm pretty confident that there are many people in your network that already see you as an ally. And what that means is that we have to be willing to listen deeply, as Andrew's emphasised, act courageously, and accept that sometimes we will get it wrong. So as you go back into your workplace, listeners, your community, your life, I invite you to ask yourself, who isn't in the room and how can I bring them in? Who is speaking but not being heard, and how can I make space for them? The work of inclusion doesn't just belong to the marginalised, it belongs to all of us. It's an us thing. So thank you for listening to the Organisational Inclusionist, and thank you so much, Andrew, for showing us that allyship, done with humility and heart, can change more than just the lives of those you stand with. It can also change us.
Thank you, Grace.
I loved having you today.
It's been lovely
you.
being here. Thank you so much.
Andrew, how can people connect with you?
Well, at the moment, Grace, I'm in the process of setting something up to connect with other men. So I don't really have a great online presence at the moment, but they can find me on LinkedIn. My name's Andrew Elliott there. And if we can connect there, then I'm going to start opening up the doors to something pretty special from September onwards, where we get together and discuss some of these deeply connecting conversations that we need to have, and just being a bit more open to discussing them together.
Amazing. So I will link your LinkedIn bio, but thank you again so much, Andrew. And to our listeners, I really hope you've taken something away from today. Thank you for joining, as always, the Organisational Inclusionist. If you've listened this far, you already know. Inclusion isn't a statement on a website. It's the choices we make every day in rooms where no one's watching. Season 2 of the Organisational Inclusionist is my invitation to you to listen harder, to act braver, to see the person in front of you fully, and to be willing to change because of it. We're not here to tick boxes. We're here to rewrite the way organisations think, feel, and treat people. Because when inclusion becomes the culture, not the initiative, everyone rises.